Hey students, how are you doing this week? This is your instructor, Ryan Bradshaw, for business law. And today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, which deals with criminal liability. And if you've ever watched an episode of Law and Order, you know what criminal liability is all about. It's where an individual or company does something that creates a criminal offense, and it causes harm to others and or an individual or other people. And that offense is created a situation where they are criminally liable for that offense. And so we're going to talk about a couple of different aspects of it. I'm going to do a kind of an introduction and walkthrough on the chapter. This is not intended to replace the reading. And so we're just going to kind of walk through and introduce the chapter. But my expectation is that you would also do the reading in an effort to help you do the homework and perform better with that. And so we're looking at the idea of business regulation. So regulate business. And when we talk about regulation, regulation is something that was designed to protect consumers or protect the public. So when you think about the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, that agency is designed to protect the environment, but also protect people who exist in the environment. And so they have regulations in place to prevent things like toxic waste dumping in order to protect the public and the environment. You think about organizations like OSHA. OSHA is a government mandated organization, and it's charged with protecting workplace safety. And so you may or may not have heard like you're not supposed to block fire exits, for example. If you go to a movie theater and there's a fire exit right there, but there's a big pallet of something in front of it, well, if there's a fire, how are you going to get out? It's obstructed. So OSHA kind of keeps an eye on things like that. Also, other workplace safety and compliance issues. If individuals are working in unsafe conditions, that is a OSHA matter. And there's regulations in place that are designed to protect workers to make sure that they're producing goods and services in a way that is not dangerous, but also protect the end users of those goods and services, the public. And so safety is such an important thing, and OSHA helps promote good work practices. And so those are just two examples, EPA and OSHA, of organizations that are mandated by the government to regulate business, to protect individuals in the environment, to protect workers, to protect the public. And so we have interstate and intrastate regulations, and interstate is between the states, intrastate is within each state. And so those are just different types of authorities that manage different regulations. And so white-collar crimes is the first thing we're going to talk about with regards to regulations and following the rules. So what do you think a white-collar crime is? You may have heard that expression before. So a white-collar crime is, in fact, this crime that is characterized as deceit, concealment, violation of trust. Usually it's a crime that doesn't do physical harm to somebody or perpetuate a crime against an individual, but the crime is against a business, and that business is usually owned by individuals or has stakeholders and shareholders that are impacted by that business. So as an example, if I'm a corporate executive and I set up a fake company that does business with my company that I manage, and I start sending invoices to the company I manage and extracting thousands of dollars a month through this fake invoice to go to my fake shell company, that's an example of white-collar crime. So they're committed by professionals that generally involve fraud. The employee committing crimes are motivated by a desire for financial gains or fear of losing business, standing, money, or property. Fraud is the intentional misrepresentation of material facts for monetary gain. There's a great documentary on Netflix right now called Fire, F-Y-R-E, and it's about this fire festival that was basically a fraud. The guy that started it had this idea that he wanted to throw a festival to promote a company, but they spent $20 to $30 million to promote this festival. It ended up being kind of a big scam when you looked at it. So check that out. There's also another type of white collar crime called pump and dump. I'll give you an example of that. In 2018, Jeremiah Hand and his brothers, Jehu Hand and Adam Hand, were convicted and sentenced between 9 and 30 months in prison for their respective roles in pump and dump scheme. In this scheme, they were dishonest about control over the company's stock and even went as far as filing false forms in an effort to raise the value of the stock. Once the value of the stock was raised, they released their shares into the market. And so it sounds like a good idea at the time. Hey, we can do this thing. We can make some extra money doing it. But at the end of the day, what they did was a crime. And it was harming shareholders. So, yeah, they went to prison for it. Not good. Ponzi schemes, you've probably heard of those before. A Ponzi scheme is where money is being used by the company new money is being used to pay for old money. As an example, there's a documentary on HBO. I'm not sure if it's called Bernie or Madoff, but it's about Bernie Madoff. And his Ponzi scheme was probably, I think, considered the biggest in history, where he had investors that trusted this guy, and these were investors that were players that could put in millions and millions of dollars, and he basically misappropriated those funds, used a lot of it for personal gain, and he would have to go out and get new money from new investors in order to pay people that had invested money previously. And it's a shell game at that point. Use the new money to pay for old money and have to get new money to pay for that second money incoming. And it just keeps going. And eventually the ball drops, the game was over, and he went to prison for it. And it actually mentions Bernie Madoff in the text. Bernie Madoff operated a 20-year Ponzi scheme throughout his company. He paid high returns using the investment's new clients' money. In 2008, investors attempted to withdraw funds, but Madoff's organization was not able to provide the reimbursement. Madoff is currently serving more than a 100-year prison sentence. So really, a really bad use of money and just a bad Ponzi scheme. Larceny occurs when a person unlawfully takes the personal property of another person or business. For example, if an employee takes another employee's computer with intent of stealing it, he or she may be guilty of larceny. In contrast, embezzlement occurs when a person has been entrusted with an item of value, then refuses to return it or does not return the item. For example, if an employee is entrusted with a petty cash at his or her office and that person potentially or personally uses or takes some of the money for themselves, that would be embezzlement. So they're taking it for personal use. There's a lot of examples of that. There's one good one that I read about years ago now. She was a accountant at a large car dealership. She created a shell company and was basically siphoning off money from that dealership to the tune of $2 million. So there are some major monetary losses here that occur. Environmental crimes. So we do have regulations in place. The following federal laws can carry criminal penalties: the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, and the Endangered Species Act. Yeah, if you harm an endangered species purposefully, you could be criminally liable for that. So also pollution, like in this example from the International Petroleum Corporation of Delaware, they admitted to altering required water tests. They also admitted to transporting waste that contain benzene, barium, chromium, cadmium, lead, PCE, and I'm gonna mess this up, trichloroethylene. I think I did pretty good with that. Trichloroethylene for disposal in South Carolina without the required reporting of information, which also violated environmental law. So yeah, anytime you have that kind of stuff happening, not good. Antitrust laws protect against monopolies. Racketeering activities include loan sharking, money laundering, and blackmailing. I get questions every once in a while like, what's money laundering? A good education on this is watching Breaking Bad. If you've ever seen that show, a lot of people have. What they were attempting to do in that show was he was creating wealth money through drug sales, illegal drug sales, and then trying to convert that money into legitimate income by filtering it through a legitimate business, which was the car wash. That's what money laundering is. So illegal money that you've earned doing something illegal, or income that's not been taxed, and then you're putting that money into and including it as revenue in a legitimate business that gets deposited into a bank, and then at that point it's become washed and legitimized, so to speak. But once again, not good, not advisable. Bribery. Bribery is when you make monetary payments for goods, services, information, or anything of value in exchange for favorable or desired actions. So giving money to somebody or some organizations in order to get something out of it is bribery. And we've talked about money laundering already. Sending unsolicited commercial mail or spam is illegal. While the onus is on the consumer to avail themselves of whatever program they can block spam, laws are in place to discourage the sending of spam. The following points are outlined in the anti-spam legislation in Washington State or similar in other legislations. So it is illegal, but I still seem to get some spam from time to time. So, all right, constitutional rights. These are some cases that identify constitutional right. So frequent issues litigated in courts are whether evidence must be suppressed because it was obtained pursuant to an unreasonable search and seizure. So that's something that comes up often. Whether evidence must be suppressed because it was obtained while the suspect was in custody without advising a suspect of his or her rights to remain silent, to speak to an attorney, and to the appointment of an attorney if he cannot afford one. That's the Miranda rights. So if that comes up, you would think that in our society now that law enforcement want to record the Mirandizing every time, just to have that on the record. Whether a state law or constitutional provision provides for more protection than the U.S. Constitution, looking at states' rights, that is a thing that comes up often. So components of a crime. So the prosecutor prosecutes the case against the accused, mens rea, if they're basically guilty or wrongful mind, the actus reus, the criminal or guilty or wrongful act. Each statute creating a crime is supposed to include the description of the mental state and the conduct that was conducted, the mens rea and the actus reus. Criminal procedure, generally the first pleading filed by the prosecutor is called the information. The next stage is called the arraignment, where the defendant appears in court so that the court can determine or confirm his or her identity, inform the defendant of the charges the prosecutor has laid or filed against him or her, and hear the defendant's plea. Then we go to criminal law and civil laws. Criminal are filed by the state against individuals and organizations. Civil law is between parties, two parties. The state will prosecute offenses like against public society or the state. So if you're driving drunk, if you've assaulted somebody, theft, things like that, violent crimes included. Civil law involve individuals such as child support, divorce, contracts, property, things like that. If somebody comes to my house and they damage my property, that'd be a civil matter, And so negligence, next thing we'll talk about very briefly. Negligence is where if they had intervened, the thing that happened may not have happened, and so they were negligent. So take the time to go in and read about malpractice, compensatory, and making the person whole, and be sure to do the reading in full. That's how you really learn and get the information. I like to go through, do the reading, take some notes, and that will help you to absorb and retain the information better. If you have any questions about this chapter or anything, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you. If not, I'll talk to you again soon. Have a great week. Talk to you soon.